I'm going to say this. I challenge her to do a drug test. I will do one with her. You will find nothing but nicotine and alcohol, and very little alcohol, a lot of nicotine. Candace, I want to say it, watching that, you can't fake crazy. That looks like Adderall-fueled schizophrenia to me.
Yeah, well, it's clearly some form of psychosis. That was my first thought, is like, you almost can't even blame her. Like, this is literally just psychosis at this point. You can see it in her eyes. You can see it in those, like, she is totally sincere. She's totally authentic. She believes in what she's saying, and it's the craziest stuff I've ever heard.
Candace Owens has Adderall-fueled schizophrenia. And that's coming from the same figure who once said this to Joe Rogan.
So you go back thousands of years, Merlin, the archetypal, or these magicians, or these wizards are taking drugs in these temples and interfacing with these palantirs, these crystal balls, which aren't really crystal balls. It's their psychic focus of an interdimensional connection while they're on drugs, looking into glass, to then be able to see the future and understand what's happening, to give them temporal power over this planet.
I've said it before. I love Alex, but at this point, I'm fairly convinced that he's most upset with Candace Owens because she is simply on his corner. Like, she has taken his corner. Gang warfare, essentially. And I've said 1,000 times, I don't buy into the dream scenarios that Candace seems to take on, extraordinary merit or extraordinary value in her investigation. I am very much in the physical. I believe in physical evidence. I believe in, contradictory testimony that might raise an eyebrow, that might require you to dig a little bit deeper. And we've got a really important one today, and that's regarding TPUSA.
Turning Point's chief security person talking about the day that Charlie Kirk was murdered. I point out the massive contradiction where he says they were not allowed to fly drones. Then I show the interview with Frank Turek where he says he was watching drone footage with Charlie Kirk. This part is breaking news because I'm not aware this has ever been discussed. The lawyer in this letter says the following: there was no discrepancy. UVU prohibited Turning Point USA from flying drones for security purposes during the event, but did allow a Turning Point USA media production drone to briefly fly over the location before the event to collect limited B-roll footage. First of all, how could this be defamatory if I had no idea about any of this? Second, I find this explanation absurd.
So Alex and Nick, which have been very critical of Candace Owens, they both deal with security issues often. As you know, both of them have been attacked at different points. Nick very famously about a year ago. So this is not something that's outside of their understanding or outside of their purview. So I want to ask them. I'm going to put this question in their camp because they're so critical of Candace Owens. You tell me why that makes any sense. You tell me why a high-level political pundit who's going to a college campus, of which you know that there will be serious security threats, the college campus allows for the media team to fly a drone to get B-roll, essentially just overhead shots of the crowd. But they refuse to allow the security detail to fly a surveillance drone to make sure that there are no threats on the roof from which a lethal round is then fired. Is that not odd to you? Does that not rub you the wrong way? Do you not go, that does seem off? So set aside the more far-fetched claims that Candace has made and just deal with that. Just deal with what is actually meaningful here. And I think that's extraordinarily meaningful. Moreover, it's meaningful because if you are a high-level security team, which Charlie Kirk's team does appear to have been, lots of military veterans, guys that had decades of experience, you would think that they'd be more than equipped to deal with a college campus event like this, particularly given that they've done it countless times with Charlie Kirk as their protectee. And yet, when they are told, sure, you can fly a drone for B-roll from the media team, but the security team cannot keep a drone up during the actual event in which we are trying to keep our protectee alive, you say, okay? You say, no problem? Really? I think that's odd. I would say that it's unbelievable, but there's been so much weirdness with this case that at this point it is believable. It's just bizarre. Like, why would you not go to the campus overseer and say, hey, we'll just fly a drone during the event for security purposes and not worry about the B-roll? Can we prioritize our protectees' security as opposed to the media production side of this event, seeing as that's probably more important? Apparently not. Apparently they didn't think that that was necessary. And the great irony in all this is that The only reason we know this is because TPUSA sent a cease and desist letter to Wolves in Finance, the guy who just did that video, basically telling him to back off, that he got a bunch of things wrong and he's got to be quiet, essentially. Now, I haven't dug deep enough to know how accurate his reporting was, so I'm not going to go to the mat defending his evidence or lack thereof. But I will say, I don't think it's really helping your case. I don't think it's helping your street cred or your reputation if you're going to start sending cease and desist letters to YouTubers. I assume Candace will be next, and I hope I won't be, seeing as I haven't made any claims about TPUSA. I've literally just covered this case and said what I think is weird and what I think is off and what I think is right and what just a genuine inquiry. But it certainly doesn't scream transparency now, does it? It certainly doesn't make you feel content that this organization is being totally transparent and allowing for a full investigation, not just from the officials, the legal officials, but also the internet. Like, do you want to know who took out your boss? I would hope so. And if not, well, then prepare for additional questions to be asked. Speaking of transparency issues when it comes to the prosecution of Tyler Robinson, you now have the judge essentially critiquing the videographers that are at one of the court hearings in which they filmed Tyler Robinson and were able to read his lips. Whether or not that was accurate, I don't know. But he says that that violated their rules about not having a camera on Tyler Robinson during the case, which now makes me fear that he's going to call for the cameras to be removed entirely.
I do find that, and I'm not a lip reader, so I don't know what the standard is for lip reading, but I do note that 9 seconds in that first clip, one could see his lips moving, and it is a significant time for, as it relates to this particular issue. It wasn't a passing shot. It was focused on these two persons, and so I find that the decorum order to no visual recording is permitted of a person's lips so as to be decipherable by a lip reader. I find that that has been violated.
So when we actually get to a real trial, we may not be able to watch it, which would be a tragedy, because I don't think anybody is going to trust the outcome of this trial if we don't have full transparency, if we can't actually see what's transpiring in the courtroom. So let's hope that's not how this plays out. We've got one other new bit of information when it comes to the Charlie Kirk case, and this was anonymous kind of testimony from an alleged relative of Lance Twiggs, the guy friend, girlfriend of Tyler Robinson.
I mean, both of them are super smart. I mean, Lance was, I do know that, and I remember, he was a, concert pianist. Like his talent for piano music was off the charts, like not normal. And that's kind of what I've heard about Tyler, is that he was just so smart and it's just a shame that these kids that had so much potential and such a bright future.
There's text messages between Tyler and Lance where they're texting after the event. A lot of people find them unusual.
The world that they were in, like this gaming world, like that was a normal way that they kind of spoke, that this wasn't an abnormal, the way they spoke wasn't abnormal.
So this alleged relative of Lance Twiggs says, no, there's nothing weird about these text messages because that's how gamers talk, which makes you think, if you know how gamers talk, that means that it's provocative humor, probably some racist stuff thrown in there, maybe threats of violence that are playful or maybe serious, but whatever. She seems to think that the text messages between Twiggs and Robinson were in that vein, which means she's never read them, because this is actually what they were saying. Robinson, delete this exchange. Robinson, my dad wants photos of the rifle. He says grandpa wants to know who has what. The feds released a photo of the rifle and it is very unique. He's calling me right now, not answering. Robinson, since Trump got into office, my dad has been pretty diehard MAGA. I'm going to turn myself in willingly. One of my neighbors here is a deputy for the sheriff. You are all I worry about, love. I'm much more worried about you. Don't talk to the media, please. Don't take any interviews or make any comments. If any police ask you questions, ask for a lawyer and stay silent, et cetera, et cetera. He then talks about, vehicle and says other weird phrases that kind of put people off. But it's clear to me that she has no idea, none, as to what these messages actually consisted of, or is able to verify the legitimacy of them based off of her defense of them being real is that, well, they were in Discord chats gaming, and so there's nothing really off about it. Two dudes saying, hey, my love and all that, yeah, not normal in the gaming world, actually, ma'am.
There have been a lot of questions about where Lance is now, whether he's in the FBI protection program. It's been a big mystery. He kind of has disappeared.
Yeah, my understanding was for the first few weeks, because there were so many threats against his family that and him, that they had. My understanding is they did have a little bit of FBI detail, and they kind of moved around a little bit, but they're not anymore. He's with his family.
Will he still cooperate with the investigation, from what you know?
I don't know. When I first found out about how he was taken in and talked to by the police, I know that they said that he was very cooperative, but they had to go get him and bring him in. He didn't voluntarily go in and say, hey, I heard about this and I have some knowledge. He had to go in, then he handed things over when they asked for him, but he didn't give up any information until he had to.
Now, after her defense of the text messages, I take everything this lady has to say with a grain of salt. However, that is pretty big breaking news if she is correct. And I have read reports elsewhere that claim that Lance Twiggs, his boyfriend, had a FBI detail, security, essentially. And I also read elsewhere that it was 4. So he had a team of 4 FBI agents that were just pulled off of his security detail about a week ago. And I find that very, very concerning. Why would we be expending that level of resources to defend a guy who was the significant other of Tyler Robinson? I want you to really think about this one, because you may be thinking, oh, well, maybe that's normal. No, that's definitely not normal. A 4-man security detail implies that this guy is an asset of some sort. And then we don't even know for sure that he's going to be testifying against Tyler Robinson. And if you are protecting him to that level, it implies he is going to testify, in which case, okay, maybe the security detail is justified. However, you pull the security detail after 4 months. Anybody else feeling like there's something off about that? Because I certainly do. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I'll tell you what it looks like to me, or what it makes me suspect, is that Lance Twiggs was in fact an asset of theirs prior. His relative is essentially saying he has no intention of cooperating. He just talked to them basically against his will. However, they then go to the end of the earth defending this guy, but then they stop the security detail. Well, he would still obviously be in jeopardy. If he was in jeopardy over the past 4 months, he's still in jeopardy. So what changed there? That doesn't make any sense. And it kind of makes you wonder if he was on their radar prior, when these weirdos are communicating in Discord or group chats and saying all sorts of strange stuff. Perhaps they were entrapped. Perhaps that's the kind of the key to unlocking this case. Now, I'm not making any allegations. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just saying there's a lot of strangeness with the fact that you would have a 4-man FBI security detail on the boyfriend of a assassination suspect. Very, very strange. And honestly, as strange as that was, doesn't get much stranger than this. Apparently, there was a movie that was being GoFundMe funded, crowdsource funded, about a decade ago that was going to be about an assassination plot, and Erica was going to be in it. Now, this was before, I think it was before she even had ever met Charlie, and certainly before they were married. So I'm not saying it means anything. I'm just saying, what the hell? Like, there's so many strange storylines in this entire story. I don't know what to make of it. It sure would be nice if we could get honest answers from, I don't know, everyone involved, his wife, TPUSA, the Twiggs. I mean, whoever was in the orbit of this story on that day. It would be great if we could actually get some transparency as to what people were saying to one another, what transpired, what other footage might exist out there. It just seems as if we need a heck of a lot more help before we're going to figure out or be content with the prosecution of Tyler Robinson. And speaking of, a lot of people keep saying, Clint, we need more shows from you. We need more shows. I'm like, look, I am not going to flood the zone covering a story without new information. I'm not going to do the daily thing. I think that has diluted this investigation. I think that Candace Owens' show, like 20% of the episodes are of significant value when it comes to this investigation. The rest are kind of fluff or painting with too broad a brush that I think ultimately tarnishes legitimate inquiry into this. So I'm not going to participate in that. I am only going to cover things when I think that they are meaningful, when there are new information, when there's things that actually jump out at me as being an angle that no one else has talked about. And that's what I'm doing here. So I will say, though, once the trial starts, oh, you betcha. Yeah, I'll be covering it daily, because that's when we will actually get to hear from the people involved in this, when we will actually get testimony, when we actually get evidence. That will be the time where I'm going to lock in, because I still very much care about this case. I just don't want to flood the zone with, junk science and guessing. I don't think it helps anybody. There are some really important things that are happening that we don't have to guess about. So let's talk about that for a second.
Is that your account?
I refuse to answer questions without my lawyer present. So I really don't know how to answer that question either.
Well, like I said, you're not
this
going
is
to jail.
freedom of speech. This is America, right?
And
Veteran.
And I agree with you 100%.
Okay. All right.
We're just trying to see if it's you, because if we're not talking to the right person, we want to go see who the right person
Okay,
is.
how can I help you?
So pretty much it's just a statement that was made as far as,
verbatim, it says the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings and refuses to stand up for the LGBTQ community in any way. Even leaves the room when they vote and on related matters. Wants you to know that you are all welcome. Clown face, clown face, clown face. 3 days ago.
So you don't know if it was you?
I'm not going to answer whether that's me or not.
Okay.
The concerning part, and not concerning for the person who's posting it, what we're just trying to prevent is somebody else getting agitated or agreeing with the statement.
Now, this one hits very close to home for me. This is a woman in Miami approached at her home by Miami PD. At first, I thought it was the FBI, because I just assumed that local PD wouldn't be investigating social media posts. But nope, I was wrong. This is my backyard. And this is a woman saying something that is almost identical to things I've said countless times. She says, the guy who consistently calls for the death of all Palestinians tried to shut down a theater for showing a movie that hurt his feelings. And then she goes on to talk about other stuff, but you get the point. I cannot believe that this is happening in my own town, my own city. I immediately tweeted at Governor Ron DeSantis, obviously did not get a response despite it going fairly viral. And it's just, I think we're all thinking the same thing, right? Are we British? Did I wake up in a red coat today? Am I British now? I don't have a good British. I don't have any good accents, actually, come to think of it. But man, and I'm pretty sure she's referencing Randy Fine or some other Floridian politician. But it's amazing to me that these cops, after the entire lockdown era, now granted the lockdowns weren't nearly as vicious in Florida, but after the lockdown era, after J6 and everything else that we've gone through as a people, as a country, they still take their marching orders. These are American cops going door to door, talking to people about what they say on the internet. And just to be very clear, what this woman said wasn't a call for violence. It wasn't even close. It didn't even approach that. In fact, she's pointing out the hypocrisy of American politicians, her representatives, who are so hypocritical when it comes to the issue of Gaza. Basically, what she's saying is this is her politician, her representative, who's constantly calling for the death of the Palestinians, simultaneously saying that you can't have a movie about the plight of the Palestinians because it hurts his feelings. Like, that's a totally rational, justifiable claim to make. It's not threatening. It's not violent in nature. There's literally nothing wrong with it. It is as crystal clear, protected First Amendment speech as you will ever come across. And this is exactly where we are headed. And this is exactly what the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism leads us down the path to. And this is exactly why, despite the fact that James Lindsay and others like to call my cadre of people the woke right, they are the woke right. No one in my camp is calling for hate speech laws. No one in my camp is calling for extra protections under the law for people that look like me or have my religion. I'm not doing any of that. Literally none of it. In fact, I'm calling for the exact opposite. I want no one to have that. But this is the woke right. This is the right-wing version of woke. This is the right-wing version of a protected class. And we all know which class makes their exception, whereas, LGBTQ, whatever, as this lady's complaining about, that's the class that they want protected, is Jewish or Israeli. And what's the very obvious counter argument? How about no protected classes? How about we're all Americans? How about if you violate my rights, that means that you violated my right? How about if you commit a crime against me, you committed a crime against me or anybody else, regardless of how they look or what they worship or anything else? That's so obviously the American perspective on these things, and yet it is increasingly the minority perspective, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is something we should be concerned about. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Ron DeSantis didn't respond, given that this was him not that long ago.
When you say from the river to the sea, you are chanting in favor of a second Holocaust. That's what that means. Now, I do think some of these students are just ignorant. I don't think they understand even what they're talking about. You hear some of them talking about end the occupation of Palestine. And I just think they need a little history lesson. There has never been a Palestinian Arab state.
I don't know if you guys have noticed, but gold has absolutely skyrocketed this past year, along with basically every other precious metal. Silver has gone absolutely crazy. If you've been watching Liberty Lockdown for any period of time, you already know why. It's economic uncertainty, fear in the markets, global chaos, you name it. And that's why people look for safe haven assets. And that's exactly why I partnered with a company like Goldco. It's not just everyday hardworking people who are looking for protection for their assets. It's central banks and billionaires too. In fact, they are stockpiling gold and silver. So I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to try and protect your assets, just as I've done, by at least looking into precious metals. Goldco specializes in helping people protect their savings with real assets, gold and silver, and they make it very simple. Just go to clintlikesgold.com. You'll get a free 2026 gold and silver kit, and you could qualify for up to 10% in free bonus silver or gold, but only while supplies last. Head over to clintlikesgold.com. Again, that's clintlikesgold.com. Thank you again to Goldco. I can't tell you how badly I want to live in a country or in a time where our politicians are not, especially local level politicians, state level politicians, are not commenting on foreign matters whatsoever. But there is one area of the world that every American politician, all the way down to the fucking dog catcher, has to have an opinion. And that's Israel. Every single time. And unfortunately, the opinion is always slanted in one direction, as evidenced by Pam Bondi, who was introduced by Miriam Adelson just yesterday.
Under her leadership, the Department of Justice has made combating anti-Semitism a top priority, especially in response to the alarming rise in incidents following October 7. She brings moral clarity, resolve, and an unwavering commitment to justice to this critical fight. Please welcome my friend, the 87th Attorney General of the United States, Pamela Bondi.
So you've got Miriam Adelson, who is the top donor to the Trump administration, who is also her top goal in life is the defense and uplifting and protection of Israel, saying that she introduces Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, and she says, the number one priority of this DOJ has been fighting anti-Semitism. To which I say, Miriam, excuse me, ma'am, there are a lot of fucking problems in this country. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but Donald Trump was almost assassinated. The J6 whole kerfuffle, you ring a bell, created a bioweapon, released it on us, forced us to get something that didn't actually protect us from it and endangered us. What else? The FBI entrapped the Whitmer folks. The FBI entrapped J6 folks. The FBI entrapped as many Trump supporters as they could possibly get their hands on. And also the FBI framed the sitting president for treason. This is the guy who you funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, multiple campaigns in a row. So why are you applauding her? Why are you applauding Pam Bondi and the Attorney General's office of prioritizing anti-Semitism?
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. And you won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
When we have all of these other issues, and you have zero concern with any of them, because your only concern is Israel. That is deeply, deeply unhealthy. Now, it's not unhealthy for Miriam Adelson to feel that way. It's her life. Feel however you want. It's her money. Send it to whoever you want. I really don't care. What's unhealthy, though, is that we have a laundry list of politicians who all feel the same way, or at least parrot it and then act that way in governance. They carry out these policies. They create hate speech laws in defense of one protected class, while simultaneously lamenting hate speech laws and all of this other woke nonsense when it came to these other protected classes, where all of the sane, rational Americans are saying to themselves, I just want equal treatment under the law, regardless of who you are, what you look like, what religion, whatever. It shouldn't be relevant. But according to Miriam Adelson, that's why she loves Pam Bondi. And there's been exactly 0 deep state people arrested under her tenure of over a year now.
I have said to people when they ask me if this Capitol crumbled to the ground, the one thing that would remain is our commitment to our aid. And I don't even call it aid, our cooperation with Israel. Because that's fundamental to who we...
So that was the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, in 2018, saying that even if the Capitol were to crumble, the last thing that would go would still be our aid, our defense of Israel. This is the same exact conference that you saw Miriam Adelson and Pam Bondi talking at just yesterday. So it's been 8 years and not a damn thing's changed. It's the exact same paradigm, the exact same. And it's a bipartisan paradigm. Very important to recognize that. Democrats and Republicans, exact same rhetoric. Not a coincidence. These people don't agree on fucking anything. If you were to say the sky is blue, the Democrats yell it's pink. That's just how it works, right? So you got to ask yourself, how is it that they all come to the same conclusion? They hate each other. They disagree on everything. But on this, though, lockstep. You had Ben Shapiro and Gavin Newsom sitting down with one another yesterday, talking about whether or not Israel-Palestine was a genocide. They both agreed. It wasn't. Shocking, right? And this is the crazy thing. For Gavin Newsom, it would be incredibly popular for him to come out and say, yes, I opposed it. Genocide or ethnic cleansing or whatever term he wants to apply to it. I oppose it wholeheartedly. In fact, so much so I would stop aid to Israel over this indiscretion. Now, he would lose Ben Shapiro, that's for sure. But he would gain a massive voting base. But you know what? He can't be the nominee if he says that, because all of the pro-Israel bucks will fizzle and fade away. So he's got to, even though he knows that in terms of the electorate, in terms of getting votes, it would be a huge win for him to say that. Because the reason I'm not putting this in moral terms is because Gavin Newsom has 0 morals. He has 0 unique thoughts that are actually founded in his own emotional calculus or his own intelligence. It is always 100% based off of what advances him in terms of power. That's it. Trust me. As a California refugee, let me just tell you, if you think Gavin Newsom ever says something you agree with, just recognize the only reason he's saying it is because it might get him a crumb of more power. That's his entire motivation in life. But point being, even knowing that, because trust me, if I know it, Gavin Newsom knows it, it would be hugely beneficial for him to say that. I oppose what happened in Gaza. That's all he's got to say. Nope. Can't do it, though. Can't do it. And basically, no politicians can, because they are instantly unelectable, or in the case of MTG or Thomas Massey, they are instantly either thrown out or put under massive pressure. It's awful.
We're seeing a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism throughout the country. What do we do about it?
Well, Elon, thanks for having me. I'm glad that people recognize the commitment of this president and the entire administration to fighting this evil amongst us. So I believe that quite a bit of what we're seeing online and in our universities and attacks on our houses of worship is funded by foreign governments and foreign evil actors, and that is definitely a focus of this administration, to trace the money and understand who's funding it, because that's critical to stopping it. But on the law enforcement side, what we're doing is at every level, we are taking a zero tolerance approach towards anti-Semitism wherever we find it.
It's Harmeet Dillon, another top brass over at the DOJ under Trump. And again, she's just repeating, yes, stopping anti-Semitism is their top priority. Why? Well, because their donors say that's got to be a top priority. Well, now keeping in mind, simultaneously, just yesterday, Don Lemon, of all people, was with the leader of a protest entering a church in Minnesota to interrupt it.
What do you think of this? I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ.
To scream at them because of ICE raids, which, by the way, is about as crystal clear a violation of the FACE Act as you'll ever find, which is supposed to basically criminalize any sort of impedance or impediment to entering a building originally structured to prevent people from stopping or blocking the entrances to abortion clinics. Well, it's now being used, or it has been extrapolated to defend churches. So you couldn't find a better example of a FACE Act violation than what Don Lemon did.
As you can see, all these pretend Christians, all these comfortable white people who are living lavish, comfortable lives while children are dragged into concentration camps. You're living real life, nice lives with your lattes, doing absolutely nothing for your Latino and Somali brothers and sisters. You come here to a man wearing a suit. Is a preacher? Did Jesus wear a suit? Did Jesus profit off the words? No! Jesus would dine with immigrants. Do not touch me. Touch me again and see what happens.
Hey, you can't.
You are a fake Christian. Why are you not standing with your Somali and Latino communities?
Now, do you think that Harmeet Dillon and Pam Bondi are going to lift a finger to stop that or to prosecute anybody involved with that? I'm not so sure. Now, I got to be really clear too. I don't know how I feel about this. There's a real tendency, and I feel it too, that because of the abuse that I've suffered, that we've all suffered over the past 6 years since the lockdown era, that there's a tendency to want to just crush our opposition. And I feel it. Believe me, I feel it. I think about it all the time. But is that a winning strategy? Does that actually improve things long term? Does that improve our circumstances, the condition of our nation? Does it actually improve it? And in this instance, I actually think it might. And I'll explain. First off, I think that there is something to be said for keeping holy ground holy, essentially preventing rabble rousers from entering places of worship to just stir shit, because that's really all they were doing. They just go in there, they scream at them, call them Nazis and shit. These are just like Christian churchgoers. I mean, it's about as irritating as a thing. Now, is anybody truly harmed? I guess not. But do you want to live in a civilization where more and more of these radicals just enter, be it a Christian church or a synagogue or whatever else? And if it were limited to that, maybe I wouldn't have such a, I guess, retaliatory approach when it comes to analyzing this. But these are the other things that are happening in the same past couple days.
No, don't take it off. You're not going to. Take it off and you won't get hurt. Take it off. Now, butt. Take it off. He gave you a chance. There you go. I got you. You're good. Get your ass up out of here.
So first up, we've got what appears to be an Indian American who had the audacity to wear a jacket that said freedom on it with an American flag at a protest in Minnesota. And therefore, he is obviously in support of ICE, and obviously, as an Indian American, also an effing Nazi, according to the people who are forcing him to remove that and chasing him out of the area. Pretty crazy. But it gets way, way worse than that. I'm going to end it there before you see the result of the damage that he took from those blows. But let me tell you, bad, really bad, just gushing blood. It was terrible. I'm cutting it so that hopefully we can keep this episode rolling. It's not just the protesters in the church. It's a confluence of all of these things that is making me feel as if someone's got to take a stand. And unfortunately, and I know this because a good friend of mine is from Minnesota, you know, Minnesota nice is what it's known for. The people there are so nice. And I really do believe, even though I disagree with Gad Saad on damn near everything at this point, I do agree with one aspect of his claim, which is this is essentially toxic empathy or suicidal empathy, that the people are so nice that they won't even defend themselves, defend their hometown, city, state, country, nothing. Like they are so beaten down that they cannot stand up for themselves. And, you know, there is a side of me as a 10th Amendment guy that just says, look, if the people of California don't want to stand up for themselves, or New York or Minnesota, then just let them be overran. There is an instinct, like my libertarian instinct, decentralized. That is kind of where I come down on these things. But the truth is, with federal elections, you don't really have that luxury to just say, well, sure, California can let in 50 million people if they wanted to. Okay, well then just recognize that through the Electoral College, essentially California and their voting, which will obviously go to the Democrats, will be just a landslide in favor of the Democrats in every federal election, not to mention all the congressional seats that they would get. And you say, well, but these people wouldn't have the right to vote until California allows them to vote. Like, that'll happen. It already is happening on very, very, very low levels, but that's the whole plan here, folks, obviously. So unless you're going to have a massive secessionary movement where like Florida becomes its own state, which now I don't feel really comfortable about, given that they're doing these, you know, social media post sting operations. But if we're going to remain the United States, well, then we're going to have a few things that everybody abides by. And unfortunately, as long as we have federal elections, it seems to me that immigration law has to be one of them. And if the domestic population doesn't want to cooperate, or if they want to chase around ICE agents and honk at them and threaten, what are we to do? Are we to just accept that paradigm and say, well, the local population doesn't want it, so therefore this state gets to have as many illegal immigrants as they see fit? Is that really going to be an acceptable thing moving forward? I would argue probably not. Are we going to allow the most loud and violent amongst us to ultimately dictate the terms by which we structure our civilization moving forward? And I would say probably not a good idea. If you want lunatics that are almost all socialists screaming at the top of their lungs as to what they want to see moving forward, and we all just go, well, they're the loudest and the most violent, so that's what we're going to do, I would argue you're going to regret that very, very fast. You're going to regret that. And if you're still not sold, here's what Don Lemon had to say about the churchgoers.
And there's a certain degree of entitlement. I think people who are, in the religious groups like that, it's not the type of Christianity that I practice, but I think that they're entitled, and that entitlement comes from a supremacy, a white supremacy. And they think that this country was built for them, that it is a Christian country, when actually we left England because we wanted religious freedom. It's religious freedom, but only if you're a Christian and only if you're a white male, pretty much. And so, yeah, I absolutely 100%, but it's an intimidation tactic. And, I said, I don't understand how I've become the face of it when I was a journalist. I do understand that I'm the biggest name there. My producers were saying, I said, how did I become the face of this? And my producer said, Don, you're a gay black man in America.
So any instinct that I have to defend Don Lemon goes out the window after that one. Just being honest. I mean, to describe these people as privileged because they're what? Because they're white people at church. Obviously, that means they're privileged. Or to say that the whole reason that you're the face of this controversy is because, you're the most famous. You're barely famous. You were on CNN. You're basically a laughingstock at this point. I think you do less views on YouTube than I do. So calm down with the ego thing there. And then the cherry on top of the woke Sunday is, I'm a gay black man. So that's obviously why we're upset with you. No, Don, we're upset with you because First Amendment protections don't really cover private property. I know, really controversial stance there. You don't have a right to come into my house and protest. And last I checked, most churches are private property, if not all, and therefore you don't have a right to protest there. You are at minimum trespassing and at maximum violating the FACE Act. So do you think that Don Lemon was in defense of Owen Schroyer, who was covering the protests on J6 and ultimately got jailed for a while? I would argue probably not. In fact, I'm pretty certain Don Lemon was not speaking out in defense of Owen. So I'm not going to defend Don Lemon on this one. Sorry. But I will say this situation is so complex, it actually requires additional nuance. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
That's him! That's him! Is that him? Is that him? Yes! Open the door! Oh my God. Drive. Oh my God. Just drive. Stop! Wait, let them go! Let them go! Hey, pull over. Pull over. Hey, leave it. Get out of here. Leave it off. Get out of here. No. Y'all just let him leave. It's not worth it. Hey! We don't know him. Stop it. Let him out.
So that's Jake Lang getting assaulted and not okay, obviously. But I will say, Jake Lang is a right-wing provocateur. I think that's a fair way to describe him. He goes to these types of events and he basically tries to get into violent altercations. And so far, it seems to be working for him. He gets a lot of headlines by doing so. I personally think that doing things like that is ultimately reckless. I mean, not just for himself, but I don't think it helps us moving forward to try and bring out the worst elements on both sides of this just to make some sort of political point. It's not dissimilar to kind of how Antifa behaves, where if it bleeds, it leads. There's no such thing as bad press. I just don't like it. But let me show you what I'm talking about. The clip I just showed you actually happened before he was assaulted in the vehicle. It's what sparked that secondary attack. I want you to pay attention, or rewind it if you need to. Go back and look at how many cameras are there. There are basically as many cameras as there are people, and there's probably 50 people in that shot. And it looks like there's about 50 cameras. And I'm not talking like cell phones. I'm talking professional cameras. Jake Lang knows exactly what he's doing. He goes right to the heart of the media, and he basically, as a provocateur, provokes people into attacking him. Now, that doesn't justify them attacking him. They shouldn't be, and they should be absolutely charged for assault. But I'm just saying, does that look organic to you? To be assaulted in front of 50, street journalists, I would argue that didn't happen by accident. So now to the macro point I've been building to. As many of you are already familiar with the term Cloward Piven. And essentially, it's a situation in which you've been led down a path where you have two different choices and both of them result in what the powers that be want you to do. And we are in one of those right now. So I want to be very clear that while I personally think that the illegal immigration crisis is so important that there has to be major deportations for this country to have any hope of a future, that does not mean that I am just lockstep defender of ICE. For instance, that woman that was shot a couple weeks ago, I didn't do an episode on it because I thought it was marginal enough of a case that I didn't really have a firm opinion on it. And I still don't really have a firm opinion on it. I think that she made terrible, terrible miscalculations. I also think that cop really didn't need to fire that second and third shot and take her life. Now, it could be argued that maybe that first shot was fatal, in which case, you drive your car into somebody, even if it's unlikely to kill them, they don't know that in that instant and they react. So anyways, setting that aside, I want you to understand the circumstances by which we got here, because I think it's really important when you're too deep in the weeds, you got to take a step back and actually look at how did this forest bloom? I know I'm mixing my metaphors. After the Hart-Celler Act in I think it was the 1950s, maybe the early 60s, there was just massive amounts of immigration that started to take hold in America. And it basically grew exponentially and then just hit a fever pitch under Joe Biden, where it was, some estimates are between 3 and 5 million annually. So anywhere from 12 to 20 million came in over the past 4 years. That is such a dramatic change of the demographics in this country that you really don't have a choice but to react. But it didn't just start then. You had decades of this. And to be clear, this was really a bipartisan issue. For the longest time, there was not a party that was hardline, deport them all the way the Trump MAGA movement is. Even in the 2000s, the George Bush administration had a term for this. It was very popular. They talked about comprehensive immigration reform. But what it usually included was both pathways to citizenship plus some sort of amnesty for the illegals that were already here. And it was going to be comprehensive. You were going to have immigration reform on all sides so that the illegals that were here become citizens, or some are deported. And then you also have, faster path for immigrants to come in. And that was just 20 years ago. So the point being is that the changing demographics in this country, the opening of the borders, or the increasingly opening of our borders, has been a bipartisan affair for about 50 years before the MAGA Trump movement came along. And I'm not sure at what exact point the Democrats recognized that a majority of the first generation illegal immigrants would come in and vote for the Democrats. But at some point they did realize that, and they said, well, we're going to let in all of them. And they just stopped doing border control. And certainly that happened effective 2020. And the circumstances that creates is essentially waking up one day and not recognizing your hometown, feeling as if you're a stranger in the state you grew up in. I felt it myself in California. I'm sure many of you have felt the same way. So here's where the Cloward Piven strategy comes in. You are left with two choices. You have one choice, which is to just say, well, these ICE deportations are too disruptive and the people are just not having it, so we're just going to stop, which is kind of the Joe Rogan pathway.
Well, there's two things that are insane. One is the targeting of migrant workers, not cartel members, not gang members, not drug dealers, just construction workers showing up in construction sites and raiding them, gardeners.
Yeah.
Like, really?
Or Palestinian students on college campuses.
Or you have the alternative pathway of saying, I don't care. This is so important. We have to get rid of them. However, we have to do it. We have to do it. And then you roll out Palantir and, big tech surveillance stuff. And then you have ICE that's funded to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars. And you start to basically look more and more like a papers, please police state. So either pathway, you're having diminished rights. If you don't do anything about the border, then you just have a slow demolition of your rights through electoral politics and ultimately the bankrupting of your country, the diminishing of your standard of living. Or you go the police state route to get rid of the immigrants, in which case you live in a police state, and that's not much of a win either. Now, setting aside the fact that Joe Rogan voted for Trump, and it's a little bit bizarre for him to think Trump was talking about deporting like 10 or 20 million people. He thought he was just going to be deporting gangbangers. You think there's that many gangbangers illegals? Like, no. So yeah, there was going to be a lot of people that were going to be deported that you probably don't feel was necessary. But I think the bigger point is this. After Reagan gave amnesty in the 1980s, California was lost forever. my beautiful home state, was lost to the Democrats forever. Now, when I say it was lost to the Democrats, don't take that as an endorsement of the fucking Republicans. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying there is an expeditious demolition of your way of life when Democrats are in power. There is a slightly slower demolition of your liberties when the Republicans are in power, especially at the state level. Trust me when I tell you, I watched it happen in real time. California was destroyed both by illegal immigration and then decades of Democrat control, with a brief hiatus when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor as a Republican who was in fact a Democrat. So it's been Democrat control for 40 years. So my position is this, and it's a very complex one. I'm not going to tell you how to feel about this or what to do. I'm just going to tell you the conclusion I've come to. For our survival's sake, supporting as expeditious and as civil liberties defending a deportation regime as can be mustered. That is what needs to happen. Simultaneously and equally as important, we should be demanding that our civil liberties be upheld, that surveillance technology like Palantir does not get greenlit. It is happening right now, I might add. So my protestations and my warning about this has not worked so far, which is why I wanted to dedicate this portion of the show to it. Because I think public understanding as to what's happening when it comes to our civil liberties, our privacy rights, the diminution of them, it's very important that we're all aware of the game that's being played. Because it's basically a heads I win, tails you lose type of circumstance, with I being the government, the federal government, the powers that be. I don't believe that it's an accident that they put us in this lose-lose position. But I do believe that of all of the bad options on offer, that is the best answer. That there does need to be deportations, but there also needs to be serious voicing of our concerns when it comes to civil liberties and rights violations. And if we can walk that razor's edge, we might get through this and salvage what's left of our country. I do want to say, big surprise interview I just heard about. Josie, the redheaded libertarian, got to interview Nick Fuentes in person. He was on IRL last night, so I wanted to give her a plug.
Okay, let's get into some controversial stuff now.
Yes.
First, why are you controversial? Do you hate women? Should women vote? Should women shut the fuck up? Am I a baby machine? On Tucker, you called Zionist Jews enemies of conservatism. Do you believe Jewish people have a place in America first? What about non-whites?
And also let you know that she handed my phone number to Mr. Fuentes, and she says that he wants to do it and he's going to be on Liberty Lockdown. So I don't know if he's going to do it, but at least now we know he has my number. He didn't respond to my emails, so we'll see if it can happen. I still like Nick a lot. I still think he's a really interesting guy, but we definitely disagree when it comes to Venezuela and a handful of other things. So I think it'd be a very interesting conversation. I think we're both sincere about America first and putting this country first, but I think we have slightly different, maybe significantly different prescriptions on how to get there. So I think it'd be a very interesting conversation. So hopefully that'll happen. If you want to see that happen, make sure you subscribe, because that will increase the likelihood he wants to come on. Hit the like button, leave a comment down below, and I will catch you guys next time. By the way, sorry, I'm going to be out of town, going to Texas to do a bunch of live sporting events with my brother and my stepdad. It's going to be a blast, but I'm going to be gone for 6 days. So I will see you a week from today, most likely. Love you. Bye.
Someone mentioned, hey, you should go on with Liberty Lockdown. I said, I don't know that I've ever heard of the guy. I went and watched him, and I thought, how have I not heard of this guy? The guy's dope. I mean, he's great on air.